Something really interesting is happening in grocery stores across Canada, and it's creating a ripple effect that's reaching all the way to American shopping malls and border towns. Picture this. You walk into a Canadian grocery store and notice something you might not have paid attention to before. Little maple leaf stickers that say Made in Canada on lots of products. What's happening is that more and more Canadians are specifically looking for these labels and choosing to buy Canadian products instead of American ones. This isn't some big organized protest with signs and chanting. There are no hashtags trending on social media or official boycott announcements. Instead, it's what people are calling a silent boycott. Canadians are simply choosing to keep their money at home rather than spending it on American goods. Why is this happening? Well, it all started when U.S. President Donald Trump said he might put a 25% tariff on Canadian goods. A tariff is basically an extra tax that makes products more expensive when they cross the border. So if Canada had to pay 25% more to sell their products in America, many Canadians thought, well, maybe we should stop buying American products too. But here's what makes this really interesting. It's not just about what Canadians are buying in their own stores. They're also stopping their trips across the border to shop in American stores, and this is having a huge impact on American border towns. For years, Canadians love to drive across the border to shop at American stores like Walmart, Target, and Macy's. On weekends, parking lots at stores near the Canadian border used to be packed with cars that had Ontario license plates. Canadians would cross over to buy everything from groceries to clothes to electronics, often because they could find better deals or different products. But now, those same parking lots look like ghost towns. The Walmart Supercenter on Walden Avenue in Buffalo, which used to be crammed with Canadian shoppers, now sits mostly empty on weekends. One person described it as looking like an abandoned landing strip because there are so few cars. The numbers tell an incredible story. In just the first 2 months of 2025, over 35,000 Canadian cars that normally would have crossed the border to shop simply didn't come. That might not sound like a lot, but each of those cars represented a family spending money in American stores. When you add it all up, New York's border counties lost about $5 million in sales tax revenue. And that's just the beginning. The bridges that connect Canada and the United States, like the Peace Bridge in Buffalo and the Rainbow Bridge in Niagara Falls, used to be busy with traffic. Now they're as quiet as a school hallway during summer vacation. In February and March of this year, the Peace Bridge saw about 11% fewer vehicles than the same time the year before. The Rainbow Bridge had a similar drop in traffic. This isn't just affecting big stores, it's hurting entire communities. That Walmart in Buffalo now closes 2 hours earlier than it used to, changing from 10 p.m. to 8 p.m. on weekdays, and locking up by 9 p.m. on Saturdays instead of staying open later. On the other side of the country, in Blaine, Washington, another border town, the local Target has seen Canadian customers drop by about 50%. The store had to cut an entire part-time shift because they didn't have enough business to justify keeping all their workers. According to local news reports, retail sales in Washington's border counties have dropped so dramatically that stores are laying off workers and putting new construction projects on hold. What used to be a bustling shopping area has turned into what some people are calling an unemployment buffer zone, all in just 3 months. It's not just the big chain stores that are struggling. Gas stations that used to have long lines of Canadian cars filling up, souvenir shops that were busy with tourists, and motels along the highways that used to be sold out every weekend are now running nearly empty. One motel owner near the Peace Bridge told local news that their occupancy rate has fallen to just 38%, even after they cut their room prices by 15% to try to attract more guests. A nearby souvenir shop that was famous for selling buffalo-themed trinkets had to let go of 3 night shift workers just to stay in business. What's really fascinating about this situation is how it shows the power of ordinary people making individual choices. Nobody organized this boycott. There was no leader telling Canadians to stop shopping in America. Instead, millions of individual Canadians each decided on their own to change their shopping habits. And when you add up all those individual decisions, they create a massive economic impact. It's like if every student in a school decided on their own to stop buying snacks from a particular vending machine company. One student stopping wouldn't matter much, but when hundreds of students all make the same choice, suddenly that vending machine company has a big problem. American retailers are definitely noticing this trend, and some are reportedly quite worried about it. The impact is spreading far beyond just the border towns. It's affecting supply chains, employment, and even future business planning for companies that used to count on Canadian customers. What's happening is that every gallon of gas that doesn't get sold at American border gas stations, every coffee that doesn't get bought by a Canadian traveler, is slowly draining away the sales tax money that places like Erie County, where Buffalo is located, depend on to keep their communities running. Inside Erie County's government building, financial alarm bells are starting to ring. The county's 2025 budget is looking pretty grim. They've already had to cut their projected sales tax revenue by about $22.7 million US. That's roughly 2% less than what they expected to bring in. Officials are calling it a modest modest dip, but by mid-February, the actual tax money coming in was running 7% below the previous year. That might not sound like a huge number, but it adds up fast. In just 6 weeks, they were already short nearly $5 million, and that shortage is directly connected to missing Canadian shoppers. If this pace continues all year, the county could end up tens of millions of dollars in the hole, enough to wipe out almost their entire annual budget for removing snow from roads in winter. Think about it this way. Each Ontario license plate that doesn't cross into Buffalo represents lost dollars that, when you add them all together, drain money away from public services like hospitals and road maintenance. What makes this situation particularly striking is how quietly it's happening. Canadians aren't out in the streets protesting or holding up signs about U.S. tariffs. They've simply stopped showing up and stopped spending. It's a boycott carried out not with loud voices, but with silence, and it might be more damaging than any noisy protest could be. As Walmart turns off its lights early, as Target reduces worker shifts, and as border motels hang vacancy signs even during what should be their busy season, the message is becoming clear. This isn't about small price differences or a temporarily weak Canadian dollar anymore. It's about feelings, a collective sense of disappointment and determination. The excitement of a bargain-hunting trip to the States has turned into resentment over tariff threats, fear of being hassled at border crossings, and anger at what many Canadians see as bullying behavior from Washington. And as long as those negative feelings persist, Canadian dollars will continue to stay away from American businesses. Those funds are being quietly redirected into Canada's economy, spent at shops in Vancouver or Montreal or through Canadian online stores, but they're definitely not crossing the Peace Bridge into Buffalo's shopping centers. In short, the billions of dollars that once filled American cash registers are now largely staying on Canadian soil. It used to be almost a tradition, a fun hour's drive across the border to find great deals, often saving Canadian families hundreds of dollars on everything from groceries to clothes. Today, that same trip has lost its appeal. Those potential savings have largely turned into likely losses. One big reason is currency exchange. The Canadian dollar, which Canadians affectionately call the loonie, has gotten significantly weaker. By mid-2025, the loonie was worth only about 73 US cents, meaning $1 costs about $1.36 Canadian cents. That's the weakest exchange rate since the early pandemic years, instantly making any US prices much less of a bargain for Canadians. On top of that, fuel prices have been really high. As of spring 2025, gasoline was around $1.55 Canadian cents per liter, even after a carbon tax was removed in April. All told, a Canadian shopper might spend nearly 200 Canadian dollars just on gas and tolls to get to Buffalo and back, effectively wiping out any cheaper in America advantage before buying a single item. And the headaches only get worse on the return trip. Since April 3rd, 2025, Canada has imposed a steep 25% tariff on a wide range of US-made goods if a traveler brings back more than their duty-free allowance. That means if you cross the border and buy something expensive, you could face a hefty tax at customs. For example, a $40 purchase might get hit with a $10 tariff at the border, plus about 13% sales tax and exchange fees. Suddenly, that great deal costs more than it would have in Toronto. Many bargain hunters are discovering that after all the fees, they would have been better off shopping at home. Meanwhile, Canadian retailers are seizing this opportunity. They know people are worried about the cost of living and are less tempted to cross the border, so they're fighting to keep Canadian customers at home. On June 16, 2025, Walmart Canada announced price cuts on hundreds of everyday items, everything from milk and eggs to baby supplies, claiming that their everyday low-price strategy would save a family of over 450 Canadian dollars a year. That's roughly 2 weeks' worth of groceries for many households. At the same time, Canadian grocery chains like Loblaws, Metro, and Sobeys put up price freeze signs across their stores, promising to hold prices steady on key products. They've effectively turned local supermarkets into discount fortresses right next door to the U.S., at exactly the moment when cross-border shopping looks least attractive. These tactics are directly targeting Canadians' wallet anxiety, and they're working. Recent consumer surveys show this shift clearly. A recent study found that 71% of Canadians plan to buy fewer U.S. grocery products in 2025, and nearly 1/4 say this pullback may be permanent, potentially redirecting 15 to 20 billion Canadian dollars away from American goods. It's not just about price, it's about pride. An Angus Reid poll in February found that 78% of Canadians are consciously buying more Canadian products, and about 59% say they're likely to boycott American-made goods altogether. From milk to clothing, the Made in Canada label has become a badge of pride on shopping trips, a quiet political statement at the checkout counter. So to sum it up, a weak loonie, higher fuel and toll costs, new border taxes, and better deals at home have completely flipped cross-border shopping from a bargain into a bad deal. Erie County officials warn they could lose over 30 million US dollars in taxes if this trend continues, but millions of Canadian families have already voted with their wallets to stay on their side of the border. This silent boycott might not have rallying cries or fanfare, but it's definitely making its presence known in financial reports and corporate boardrooms. The warning signs are flashing bright red in data that US companies and local governments simply cannot ignore. In just the first few months of 2025, cross-border car traffic plummeted and sales figures in border regions fell dramatically. By early spring, American officials could see that border crossings from Canada were down by double digits compared to the year before. Erie County's tax receipts were already far below what they had projected. Those sprawling border stores that once served as virtual money printing machines, like the Walmart in Buffalo or the Target near Vancouver's border, were suddenly echoing with emptiness. The steady stream of Canadian shoppers that had kept them busy simply never showed up. It's not just a few small shops noticing the change. The biggest retail companies are taking a hit too. According to analytics firm Placer AI, visits to major U.S. retail and restaurant chains fell nearly 5% in early 2025 compared to the year before, with even sharper declines in New York and Washington state, the places that depend most heavily on Canadian shoppers. Meanwhile, inside corporate offices, panic is starting to set in. Remember that leaked internal memo we mentioned? Here's what it revealed. A leaked Walmart memo shows that at least 3 of their border area superstores have quietly been put on closure watch after first quarter sales plummeted more than 20%. One analysis by Barclays projects that if this trend continues through the year, Walmart and Target alone could lose over $1.6 billion in sales at their border locations. That's a massive chunk of business essentially vanishing overnight from big-name retailers. The next industry to get hit has been fast food, those burger and coffee joints that line the border highways. Industry data from a dozen U.S. border counties shows that the big 3 fast food chains, McDonald's, Wendy's, and Burger King, saw about $350 million in sales disappear in the first quarter of 2025, mostly at locations just a few miles from Canada. Those are the Big Macs, fries, and coffees that Canadians would have bought during shopping trips that are now being skipped or replaced by meals at home. Instead of stopping at a McDonald's in New York, Canadians are hitting Tim Hortons or local spots on their own side of the border. One skipped burger meal might seem minor, but collectively it means emptier drive-thrus and dining rooms for U.S. franchises near Canada. Electronics retailers and pharmacies, sectors that for years benefited from Canadians chasing better prices or variety in the U.S., are also struggling with this shift. Consider high-end gadgets. New U.S. tariffs and Canadian counter-tariffs have made certain electronics more expensive when imported. By 2025, a new iPhone in Canada cost roughly 30% more than in the U.S. once tariffs were factored in, erasing most cross-border savings. Not surprisingly, far fewer Canadians are bothering to drive to U.S. electronics stores. At the Walden Galleria Mall near Buffalo, the Apple Store's visitor count is down roughly 25% since the holidays. Even that store has scaled back its staffing, cutting Genius Bar service on weekends because there just aren't enough Canadian customers coming in. Meanwhile, Canadian e-commerce and delivery services have stepped up big time. Amazon Canada's same-day orders in Ontario and Quebec have doubled compared to last year, and big pharmacy chains are now offering enhanced services to keep customers at home. The shift in spending habits even extends to fashion and luxury goods. High-end shopping, which might seem like a small market, actually used to drive a lot of cross-border trips, with Canadians hunting for deals at U.S. factory outlets or luxury boutiques. But now the fashion tide is turning inward as well. A recent retail report noted that sales of Canadian-designed apparel rose solidly in 2024 and are expected to keep climbing this year, boosted by a Wear Canadian trend. Shoppers are proudly wearing labels by local designers, and upscale Canadian department stores are cashing in. For the first time, iconic Canadian retailers like Holt Renfrew and Simons have even surpassed Saks Fifth Avenue in sales per square foot on Canadian soil, a remarkable shift in high-end retail. Meanwhile, across the border at outlet malls that once depended on busloads of Canadians, it's a very different scene. At the fashion outlets of Niagara Falls, New York, just minutes over the bridge, store managers are witnessing a drought of Canadian shoppers. The Gucci outlet there, for example, reports that as much as 60% of its usual weekend foot traffic has disappeared. The situation is so slow that staff scheduling has had to adapt. Employees now work shifts like 3 days on, 1 week off to avoid outright layoffs, essentially spreading the limited work among the remaining staff. These are drastic measures for luxury retailers that not long ago were thriving on cross-border tourism and favorable exchange rates. Membership-based warehouse clubs like Costco and Sam's Club tell a similar story. Internal figures show Canadian member renewals at border area stores down nearly 12% from last year, driving sales at those locations to their lowest levels since the pandemic. On a recent earnings call, a Costco executive even said they are re-evaluating their border stores because those locations are no longer sufficiently profitable. When even Costco starts questioning whether to keep stores near the border, it's clear a fundamental shift is happening. All these individual threads, fewer cars crossing, emptier malls, quieter fast food joints, weave together into a larger picture of an entire cross-border economic ecosystem coming undone. The pain doesn't stop at retail chains or big gas stations. It spreads out to all the small businesses and services that rely on the back and forth movement of cross-border traffic. Even niche businesses are hurting. U.S. mailbox rental services that once stored Canadians' online orders are now seeing far fewer packages. Duty-free shops are losing most of their business. The Frontier Duty-Free Association, which represents border retailers, says many shops have seen revenue drops of 60% to 80%. In one case, a duty-free store in New Brunswick that operated for over 30 years is shutting down after sales fell by more than half. Its owner even went on TV urging travelers to keep your money in Canada rather than spend it across the border. When Canadian wallets turn inward, all those cross-border economic connections start breaking. Local U.S. counties lose out on tens of millions in tax dollars that would have paved roads or funded schools. Hotels, diners, and souvenir shops face cutbacks or closure, and layoffs ripple through these communities. And the strangest part is how quiet it all is. There's no big headline event, no border closure, no sudden blockade, just a slow, major shift in how people spend their money. Day by day, the damage continues to spread. The most striking aspect of this shift is that ordinary people acting quietly on their own have created a shockwave that big companies and governments now have to deal with. There was no loud campaign or top-down directive, just thousands of individual choices. Families decided that the cross-border trip wasn't worth it. Shoppers felt it was more sensible or more patriotic to buy Canadian products. Travelers said, maybe we'll skip that U.S. trip this time. Each of those decisions was like a snowflake, and together they formed an avalanche. Part-time retail jobs have vanished in U.S. border towns. Road budgets are shrinking without Canadian tax dollars, and businesses that once boomed on weekend tourists are experiencing what feels like a mid-July winter. Once the trust and convenience that fueled cross-border shopping are gone, even giant 70% off sale signs or duty-free bargains become useless bait that few will bite. An entire generation of cross-border bargain hunters has realized they might actually save more money, avoid hassles, and even feel prouder by spending at home. So if Washington continues on the same course, tariffs in place and tough talk in the air, one has to wonder, can any sale or incentive truly lure back Canadian shoppers, or has a lasting change already taken root? We've seen retail and fast food take a hit, and other sectors could be next. So far, Canadian consumers have shown they're willing to dramatically change their habits to make a point. It's a quiet collective stand, but it's proving remarkably effective. Ultimately, this is a powerful example of consumer choice in action, showing how millions of individual decisions, when they all point in the same direction, can reshape entire economies without a single protest sign or organized campaign. Millions of ordinary Canadians, without any central coordination, have sent a message that's being heard loud and clear in boardrooms and government budget offices across the border. It's a powerful reminder that trust and goodwill take years to build but can be lost very quickly. Unless something changes, this cross-border wallet migration will likely continue. It remains to be seen how this quiet economic standoff will play out and which other parts of the cross-border economy might shake next. As this silent boycott unfolds, industry experts and local officials are starting to ask a deeper question. What happens next? Retail and fast food are already showing clear signs of damage. But if Canadian spending continues to shift inward, which industries will be next in line to feel the effects? One potential area is medical tourism. Before the pandemic, thousands of Canadians traveled to the United States each year to get specialized procedures or tests that weren't readily available in Canada's public healthcare system. While still a niche market, these visits brought hundreds of millions of dollars into private U.S. clinics, imaging centers, and surgery facilities, especially in cities like Buffalo, Detroit, and Bellingham. If trust continues to erode, and if Canadian provinces improve domestic care or subsidize private options at home, cross-border medical dollars may begin to dry up as well. Higher education could be another casualty. U.S. colleges near the border have long welcomed Canadian students, offering competitive programs, international experience, and sometimes even cross-border tuition incentives. But with the current climate of tariffs, complex visa rules, and growing economic friction, parents may hesitate to send their children south. Instead, Canadian universities, which are already globally ranked, may see a boost in enrollment from students who might otherwise have looked to the U.S. A decline in Canadian applicants could impact tuition revenue at dozens of regional U.S. schools, which often rely on full fee-paying international students to balance their budgets. Then there's automotive tourism, where Canadians used to cross the border for deals on cars, parts, and service. But with customs checks tightening and exchange rates worsening, those transactions are vanishing as well. Auto dealerships in border states like New York and Michigan are already reporting reduced showroom visits from Canadian buyers. It's not a total collapse yet, but the drop in big-ticket sales is noticeable. Even mailbox rental services, a peculiar but once profitable sector, are on the decline. Canadians used to rent U.S. postal addresses for online purchases unavailable in Canada or to bypass international shipping fees. As Canadian retailers expand their online catalogs and improve delivery speeds, the need for a U.S. drop box is fading. One Niagara Falls, New York mailbox center reported a 58% drop in renewals in 2025 compared to the prior year. What we're witnessing is more than a short-term reaction to tariffs or tolls. It's a long-term shift in how Canadian consumers think and act. For decades, the story was simple. American goods were cheaper, American stores were bigger, and the cross-border trip was worth it. But now that formula has completely broken down. Economic nationalism, once something only a few people cared about, is becoming mainstream behavior. Canadians are not just buying locally out of necessity, they're doing it out of preference. Local chains like Canadian Tire, Shoppers Drug Mart, and Real Canadian Superstore are not only matching American prices, but they're also capitalizing on these feelings, marketing themselves as defenders of Canadian values and economic self-reliance. The message is subtle but powerful. Shop Canadian, support Canadian workers, and resist American overreach. Consumer data backs up this shift. A study called Dunnhumby's Wave 10 Tracker for 2025 shows that among Canadian families earning under 75,000 Canadian dollars per year, the intent to reduce U.S. purchases has grown by over 30% in just 6 months. Even high-income Canadians who once made up the bulk of luxury and electronics cross-border shopping are scaling back. Nearly 4 out of 10 respondents in the $100,000 to $150,000 income bracket say they are now actively avoiding U.S. retail spending. It's not just patriotism, it's practical math. With delivery times down to same day in many provinces, price matching apps everywhere, and exchange rates working against them, Canadian consumers have little incentive to leave their own country for consumer goods. It's easy to focus on the billion-dollar losses for retail giants or the layoffs at burger joints, but what's often missed is the long-term cost of alienating a loyal customer base. For decades, Canadian consumers were among the most reliable and high-spending visitors to U.S. border towns. They returned week after week, holiday after holiday. That kind of loyalty is priceless and fragile. Now much of that loyalty has shifted. The Canadian consumer of 2025 is digitally empowered, price-aware, socially conscious, and politically engaged. They're not just shopping, they're voting with their dollars, and their dollars are increasingly staying north of the 49th parallel. For local U.S. economies that once relied on that steady flow of Canadian money, the message is clear. You can't take cross-border business for granted. Whether it's a Walmart in Buffalo or a boutique in Bellingham, the situation has changed. And unless policies and perceptions shift dramatically, that change might be permanent. The story of Canada's silent boycott is not one of protest, but of principle. It shows how ordinary consumers, quietly, individually, and without coordination, can deliver an economic message more powerful than any picket line. It's a story of how friction at the policy level can ripple all the way down to local economies. A bridge that sees fewer cars, a motel with empty rooms, a gas station with idle pumps. Together, these represent more than lost sales. They symbolize the breakdown of economic partnership. And in that breakdown lies a lesson for both countries. Trade is not just about treaties and tariffs. It's about trust. And once that trust is lost, even the biggest brands and the best deals may not be enough to bring people back. Remember to hit like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. Your support means a lot.